according to the Defense Department's own estimates, the U.S. has 900 military bases that sprawl across 153 countries. Many of these bases are the result of strategic international agreements. Others are remnants of past conflicts. But let's face it, with the ebb and flow of U.S. wars for occupation, American bases hardly ever shut down and close for business. In fact, the U.S. still has expansive outposts in Korea, Germany, and Japan. Some countries have one, some have three, but specifically on the Japanese island of Okinawa, there are at least 32 U.S. military bases occupying 20% of the island. Now, if you don't think 30-plus military bases on the landmass roughly the size of Long Island is enough, worry not, because plans for yet another base are currently underway. Well, a group of 29 artists, academics, and peace activists have now come together to issue a statement of condemnation against the construction of new base and a call for an end to the military colonization of Okinawa. One of those people is Peter Kuznick, historian and co-author of The Untold History of the United States. He joins me now to talk about the real effect these bases have on the local community. Thank you so much for coming on, Peter. Always a pleasure. So, Peter, you're one of the signers of the statement, along with Oliver Stone, Michael Moore, Noam Chomsky. How did you guys all get together to sign this statement, and what are you trying to get out of it?
Well, we decided to issue this statement after the governor of Okinawa, Governor Nakayama, betrayed his electoral pledge to the people of Okinawa and agreed with Prime Minister Abe that the base could be relocated to the Henoko part of Okinawa. You have to realize that the base already exists in Ginowan City. It's the Futenma base, the U.S. Marine Air Base in Futenma. And there's been a lot of protest about that for many years. In 1996, 3 U.S. troops raped a 12-year-old girl, and the people there were just fed up. So since 1996, there's been a movement on Okinawa to get the base out of Ginowan City, which is this heavily populated area, and the people of Okinawa want to get it out of Okinawa completely. It's been a very unfair situation for a long time. They were first taken over by the Japanese. Then there was the big battle in 1945. Then the U.S., after the war, set up its bases all over Okinawa. And you see this little area, it's really less than 1%, 0.6% of the entire landmass of Japan, and it has 74% of all U.S. bases in this very, very small area. So this was the controversy. Once the governor betrayed the people of Okinawa, many of us decided it was time to act. So we put together this statement, and then we only wanted to solicit a small number of signers originally, people who've got reputations, people who are known by the public in Japan. And so we initially started with 29. We now have about 75. And we'll issue a second statement with more significant people who are known inside Japan.
Incredible. I mean, as we mentioned, Okinawa is about the size of Long Island, roughly. Has over 30 bases, thousands and thousands of troops. Why there? Why is there such a highly concentrated military presence on this island?
Because it's strategically located. It's located close to China. It's located close to Taiwan. It's a base that the United States has already been using in every U.S. involvement in the Pacific. Since World War II, we've sent troops from Okinawa. There was enormous protest there because it was such an important part of U.S. policy in Vietnam. During the U.S. invasion of Vietnam, the troops were going very often from Okinawa. So they've been used in a way that's been very unfair and that they've protested against. There's also a lot of chemical waste there, a lot of toxic elements there, plus noise pollution, accidents of helicopters crashing. People there have really been exploited, and they're strongly opposed to it. In all the polls, between 70 and 90% of the Okinawan population has come out against the base relocation. They want it entirely off of Okinawa. They've got far too many bases already. More than half of U.S. troops in Japan are located at Okinawa. So it's part, as you said before, part of this U.S. empire of bases, as Chalmers Johnson called it. You know, we're very critical of all of that. Our group came together narrowly around the relocation to Henoko in opposition to Governor Nakayama's statement. But many of us have much broader concerns about the U.S. military footprint. And this is also part of Obama's rebalancing toward Asia, his so-called Asia pivot. Hillary Clinton announced this in Foreign Policy magazine in November 2011 in an article titled America's Pacific Century. So this is what we want to shift troops from the Middle East now to the Pacific. We're getting ready for the 21st century, the century when the United States is going to dominate the Pacific even more than it has before. But the U.S. has a big adversary there, and that's China. And whereas a few years ago, the United States was the leading trading partner for all the members of ASEAN, the 10 nations of ASEAN, now China is a leading trade partner with all of them. So it's China's economic growth and China's military revitalization that gets the United States quite alarmed now. So the United States is trying to fortify in the area. Right now, our troop balance is 50% in the 50% in the Atlantic and 50% in the Pacific, our naval forces and our air force. We want to rebalance to 60% in the Pacific to 40% in the Atlantic.
You know, reading blowback from Chalmers Johnson when I was in college actually awakened me to a lot of the effects of U.S. imperialism, U.S. militarism. Really was astounding, that chapter on Okinawa.
Yeah.
He calls it a U.S. military dictatorship, and he kind of outlines the extreme effects that these bases have had on the local communities. You know, you mentioned this rape case that really got, was kind of a turning point for a lot of people there. Talk about the other effects that this presence has had on the community.
Well, sometimes one of the arguments that's made is that it's had a positive effect, that the U.S. economy has bolstered the economy of Okinawa, that we've given a lot of employment. The reality is that in 1972, when Okinawa reverted from American to Japanese nominal control, at that point 15% of the economy and sales were based on the U.S. troop presence. Now it's down to 5%. It's negligible. Only about less than 2% of the Okinawan workforce actually works on the base or related to the base at this point. So it really has a very little, none of the positive effect that they've been trying to say is actually present. The negative effect is pervasive. I mean, this is it's occupation. It's always been occupation. They were forcefully, first Japan fought with them in the 17th century. They were forcefully occupied by Japan and made part of Japan, annexed in the late 19th century. Then the United States took them over, and the United States allowed them to revert. But what you have to understand also is going on there is you've got the Abe administration in power in Japan. And Abe is the most right-wing nationalist, perhaps, that we've ever had in the leadership in Japan. And Japan has been moving sharply to the right, especially in recent months. For Abe's first year, this is not the first time he's been prime minister. He was prime minister from 2006 to 2007. And that time he was forced to resign in disgrace in 2007. He learned his lesson. This time, before he's moved on his real right-wing agenda, what he's done is rebuild the economy. And his popularity actually went up quite a bit from the Abenomics, they call it, revitalization of the Japanese economy. But in the last few months, his true colors are coming out. And his goal is to move Japan so sharply to the right. John Mitchell, the U.S. Attorney General for Nixon, once said in 1970 that this country is going to move so far to the right, you're not going to recognize it. Well, it didn't quite happen under Nixon, it happened under Reagan. But Japan is doing the same thing now. Japan is moving so far to the right that it's going to be unrecognizable. You just look at the recent things. The new defense strategy, increased defense spending for the first time in a decade, including Ospreys, amphibious assault vehicles, drones they want to start purchasing now. But also, in early December, they passed a new secrecy law, and that's going to criminalize all kinds of national secrets and make it much easier to actually make things classified.
Taking a cue from the U.S., Peter, I wanted to interrupt you really quickly because we have about 30 seconds left. Is there any way for people here in America to stop the construction of this base, to stop the relocation of this base?
We're going to have a petition online very shortly. We want people all over this country and other parts of the world to stand behind the people of Okinawa. They've fought alone. They've fought very bravely. There's going to be a mayoral election in the city of Nago, and Mayor Inamine, the current mayor who's really leading the fight against the bases, is overwhelmingly ahead, despite all the efforts of the national government to defeat him. So the people of Okinawa have stood up. It's our responsibility to support them.
We do need to stand with our brothers and sisters there. It's the U.S. that's doing this. Thank you so much, Peter Kuznick.
Thank you, Adam.
Historian, author, Untold History of the United States. Everyone check it out. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
That's our show, you guys. Join me again tomorrow when I break the set all over again. Thank you so much.